Hello and welcome to the Local Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Johnson. The Local Leaders Podcast provides a platform for successful business owners to share their stories, their experiences, their advice, and their ideas in order to help our listeners achieve more success in their business and in their lives. Get ready, another great show is coming up. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Local Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Johnson, and I am really excited today to be able to introduce you to Shaundra Hosier, the owner of Complete Auto Repair just west of Denver in Colorado. Welcome to the show, Shaundra, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate the opportunity to join you.
Well, we again appreciate your time because we know you're trying to run a business and you don't really have a lot of time to sit around and talk. But we do appreciate it because we want to hear from you and try to learn from you and help our audience to be more successful in their businesses. So if you would, and if you don't mind, I'd love to share with our listeners a little bit about your business and kind of its history and what you guys do specifically, and just anything that you want to share about Complete Auto Repair.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, it's all you.
Okay. So I came into this industry as part of a family-owned business. It was Dad's garage for 10 years, and he knew how to fix cars, but didn't quite know how to run a business. So he asked me to step in and learn that side of it. So I pretty much self-taught everything I know today. Most of it came from magazines and reading articles about successes and failures of other shops in the industry, and applying what they used and making sure we didn't follow their mistakes also, to really get us to where we are today.
Were there any special publications or any special resources that kind of stood out that other people might enjoy or have an opportunity to learn from that you remember, or was there just too many?
My favorite publication that I got the most information from was the Ratchet and Wrench magazine. Just reading all the stories about the different shop owners and seeing what's worked for them was really my inspiration and motivation to further my education to keep the business not only afloat, but moving forward.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that because it's always great when we have something specific we can offer people and say, hey, if you hadn't checked out, Ratchet and Wrench, it's a great resource. And again, that's what we want to provide to our listeners, are resources to help them get better. And so let me just ask you this, coming into to work with your dad, you kind of grew up in the automotive services space, but had you been did you have an interest in fixing cars or, before you got started?
So when I was growing up, I spent a lot of time rebuilding classic cars in the garage with Dad, and that's kind of where my love for cars came from, was learning all those carbureted monsters. But then I went to college into a couple different industries and came back on once Dad had acquired a shop and moved on from being a technician, and kind of fell in love with the industry and saw a lot of room for change and modernization and room to improve. And that really gave me a lot to want to run with, to see this industry be better than it currently is.
Yeah, well, when you look, and I work with a lot of auto shop owners, repair service owners, tire shops, etc. You do tend to see a bit of old school in many businesses, very successful businesses, but a lot of them are kind of in that old school mentality with written papers and lots of paper floating around the office, and and whatnot. So it's almost like you had a blank slate probably when you came home and said, okay, here's what I got. What do I do with this?
And I think that's partly what's benefited my success is that I came into it with a different perspective. I had never been a technician. I was never trained in the industry. I knew how to put numbers together, understood what they meant and how to make them work for you.
Mm-hmm.
I came in with an organized mindset and really saw where my talents could benefit what already existed. And
And he
it
had,
just gave me,
I'm sorry,
sorry,
I
go.
interrupted you. I was just going to say you had just taken over, I guess, in the last year. So that's accurate, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And so he had a 9-10 year business going at that point. Just to backtrack a little bit, what do you guys, are there specific makes or models that you guys work on? Are you a general repair service place? Come just give us a feel for what it is that you all do for your local listeners who maybe haven't had a chance to work with you before.
Sure. Yeah, we're just a general repair shop. We work on almost every make and model. We do basically everything mechanical, no body work. But basically, we're your one-stop shop.
Nice. And again, located just outside of Denver, Colorado. So if you're in that area and you hadn't had a chance to get to know these guys, be sure, listeners, that you get yourself over there and get your next oil change, or get your set of tires, or get your air conditioning system fixed, because we know it's hot. So let's make sure that we're taking care of those vehicles. And you know what, today, I hadn't even thought about this till just now, but I just left a shop earlier today. I left one auto repair shop, and then I've got another customer's in the used car business that, it's a reseller or a car sales lot. And, it's so difficult today to find a good used car. Are people just generally hanging on to their vehicles more now or longer?
So I would say within the last year, we've really seen a shift of people wanting to maintain and repair their current vehicle rather than getting into a hefty new car payment.
Mm-hmm.
So we've seen a pretty big uptick in people wanting to maintain their older vehicle and keep them on the road as long as they possibly can.
Yeah, and people are keeping cars longer, and of course, maintaining them, as you said, is critical. But it's just hard to go find a good used car, I think, because a lot of people are hanging on to theirs, and that's great for business, right?
It is.
Hey, let me ask you, shifting gears on you again, no pun intended, but COVID has impacted the world, of course, and we all know how that has gone. But it seems to have not been as significant in terms of revenue impact in our repair services customers. Did you guys notice, a big reduction, a big increase? I mean, kind of tell us the impacts or how COVID affected you guys.
We really didn't have a major impact from COVID. We had about a month and a half that it was a little bit slower. But we have such a great customer base that came in that first week and dropped their keys and said, hey, we want you guys at the end of whatever this is that's coming down the pike, and we're your lifelong customer. Just we'll take care of you if you take care of us. So we had a lot of those great customers, and also it really made people more aware of not going out and blowing all their money on new big purchases like a new vehicle. So
Yeah.
it really didn't have too much of a negative impact on our industry.
Well, that's good. So you're able to maintain your employees, and speaking of which, has that been a problem at all of having enough staff or enough mechanics or any that, have you had any of those issues in your business?
We were very fortunate. We were not only able to maintain all of our employees, but we actually brought a few new members onto the team and increased our staff size. So that really wasn't a big issue. There was still plenty of qualified help out there. I guess a lot of the shops that didn't see that they needed to pivot as quickly to accommodate customer needs during COVID, we were able to make a quick pivot and stay busy. So we were able to take in some extra technicians, extra front counter staff, whereas they were laid off from other shops.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. And it's certainly a good thing because in a lot of industries, we've seen an impact in the last year of finding it difficult to find and add new people because there just doesn't seem to be as many people working in the that want to work to fill all the jobs that are out there. So it's awesome that you're able to keep your staff and even grow it and find good people to put in place. Are you guys are y'all a single location shop at the moment? And do you have any plans to expand?
We currently have 2 locations.
Okay.
Both
you.
of them are in Lakewood.
Got it. 2 locations in Lakewood. I should have asked you that to start with. So thank you for letting us know. So you got 2 locations to keep up and running. And so how many employees do you have total?
I'd have to go through and count, but we're in the neighborhood of 15.
Wow. Yeah. That's a nice, I mean, that sounds about right for 2 shops. And both shops focus on our general automotive work.
Right.
Okay, great. It's good to know because that means you can get people in and get people out. You've got more capacity to service, which is, also a challenge of late. It seems like a lot of automotive shops are really busy and the work is backlogging and you're having to wait, or customers are having to wait maybe a little longer than they're accustomed to. So it's nice to have that added capacity. I wanted to ask you because it's something that's really interesting to our listeners and it's really interesting to me and I hope everyone else, but I really enjoy meeting businesses like yourself where you've got essentially a woman-owned business that's, as I said earlier, kind of in a traditionally male business. Automotive repair, tire shops, et cetera, a lot body shops, you tended to be in the old days more male dominated. Was that difficult for you to come in and take over that business as a woman? And maybe you could just kind of describe your experience and your take on that whole male versus female thing.
Sure. Yeah. And some days I still get that from customers that haven't been in before. They kind of look at me funny and say, "What do you mean you're the owner? You're not a mechanic and you're a woman." Some of them don't understand still, but most of them are, pretty supportive of it. It's definitely created an extra layer of challenge, I guess. But, that's part of what drives me every day is to help make this industry something that it hasn't been for the last 100 years, to give it some new insight and a fresh take.
Mm-hmm. And a fresh new look to go with it. And I think that organization, is something that I know my wife and many women that I've worked with in the past tend to be pretty organized. I know some aren't, but organization and bringing things up with technology. You probably have been moving in that direction. We'll talk about that too. But it's just inspiring for me to see more women getting into the business. And what advice might you give to a lady and men in general too, but specifically for women, of things they're going to run into, or what advice would you give them if they were starting out, kind of where you were a few years back?
Yeah, and one thing that I had to learn a while back is that, male or female in this industry, you got to have a little bit of a thick skin. Things aren't always sunshine and rainbows. But you can either let a challenge cripple you or fuel your fire. So decide which one you're going to let it do, either be against you or for you.
I like that. Fuel your fire. I'm trying to write that down. That's why I keep looking away. Trying to write and not look is not a talent that I have. But yeah, that's awesome advice. And anyone, well, let me backtrack. Not every person is cut out to be a business owner. It doesn't matter, in my opinion, what the business is or whether you're a man or a woman. Owning a business, comes with challenges. And I'm curious as to now that it's your place, any specific challenges that have cropped up and kind of slapped you in the face as you come along your journey? Or I'm just curious kind of what the bigger obstacles have been for you outside of the whole female male thing.
Honestly, the biggest challenge that I've seen probably is kind of the impacts, the aftermath of COVID. That seems like it's brought kind of a lot of crime into our area, which is something that the community as a whole is really struggling with, I feel like, in our area.
So have you had to take measures to protect your business that you hadn't anticipated maybe?
We've added a lot of extra security features, kind of learning to plan for the unexpected more so than we ever have or felt that we would have to.
Yeah. I'm assuming like security systems and things like that, and maybe bring the dog in, right? That would be the old school way to do it. Is add a couple of dogs out to the lot. But
Yeah.
it's that's interesting. I haven't heard that issue coming up for others before, but location can drive it, and the community that you're in, and all the different variables that come into play. But crime is everywhere, and it's something as a business owner you've got to be aware of. You got to protect people's assets that they're leaving with you, and you got to protect your people as well, which is another burden that kind of weighs on business owners. Are there let me ask you about like the financial piece of the business. How do you gauge success in the business? And are you looking at the sales figures every month or every week or every day, or are you looking at profitability? I mean, what is it that you feel or that matters to you in terms of showing to yourself that you've had a successful day or week?
Sure, and that's something that I review on a daily basis. I feel like if it's anything beyond a daily task that you're not staying on top of it adequately.
Yeah.
Because the numbers don't lie. I mean, that's kind of our scan tool for the business to tell us where we're at, where we're heading, and what we need to change in our day-to-day operations. Gives us projections for the week, the month, the year. I mean, we're responsible for so many people's paycheck and well-being that it's really irresponsible to not be on top of your numbers so that these employees can take home paychecks every week.
Right. And I think that's one of the bigger burdens of ownership is that you become responsible for others and their livelihoods, for them and their families. And I know to me that adds stress, especially when things aren't quite where they ought to be, and you're worried about hitting that payroll. And you've got roughly 15 people that you're taking care of, with the business that the business is supporting. So I understand that completely. Is it, are you looking at, is it sales like the first thing that you're looking at, sales numbers, or are you looking at labor cost? Are you looking at parts cost, or are you looking at all of it?
So I kind of like to look at the big picture and then drill down as needed. So I guess the biggest picture would be overall sales.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, you really have to address each key performance indicator and drill down on what you're doing well and what can be done better.
What are you seeing right now in your business that you're working on, maybe trying to, or start to working on, or have been working on that needs some improvement? Is it customer service experience? Is it cost? Just curious.
Sure. Yeah, we're always working to improve customers' experience. I mean, there's always ways that you can be better than you were yesterday in that sense of it. One thing that is kind of newer with, the aftermath of COVID is the cost and availability of parts are getting a little more difficult to source and a little bit higher priced. So that's kind of our area of focus for the latest.
How do you solve that? I mean, are you shopping suppliers, or are you working to press the ones that you're already working with? Just curious as to what you're doing to try to adjust.
Sure. Yeah, and we're really trying hard right now to not pass those problems on to the end consumer. Like a lot of other industries are, we're working with our employers to either buy items more in bulk or more frequently to get deeper discounting, making sure that we're shopping every vendor to see who's not only going to get it here the quickest, but has the best price on a good quality product.
And do you find that, a lot of people tell me, or a lot of shop owners have told me that, you've got the traditional auto supply stores and shops that are in your area, that, certain items tend to be better priced at each, at supplier A, and then the other items you get from supplier B, or do you kind of hop your shopping around that way, or your purchases?
Yeah, we kind of know which supplier has the best pricing on a select part. But then we'll always double check when we have the time to make sure that another vendor is not sneaking in behind them to do a little better.
Yeah, well, you got to in your business, because that's a big piece of it. And hey, let me ask you a kind of a sideways question, or a weird question maybe for you, but and I've had this conversation with a couple of people, so I'm just curious. Many of the several shops that I've worked with are customers of mine. There's a couple that actually allow customers to get their own parts these days, because customers are always complaining about the price of parts, and they can go get them on the internet, and they allow that. But many, or I'd say most of my shop owners do not. What's your take on that? Do you guys allow customers to get their own parts, or not?
We don't allow customers to supply their own parts, just to avoid the hassle of customer bringing in the wrong part or a low quality brand part. It just creates kind of a mess and a jam in the shop when we go that route. And then we can't give them our 2-year nationwide warranty to back it up in case their part fails tomorrow or next week.
Yeah, that's where I was going with it. And what I usually argue is, hey, if that part fails, you're going to have to fix it, number one, and spend the labor again for free that you got to give away. And you can't warranty the parts because you didn't buy them. So that tends to be the bigger argument. But it does surprise me when I see people that allow that, but it is out there. So it's kind of interesting to me. How about fleet work? Are y'all doing any fleet work there?
We do a fair amount of fleet work. I would say we have probably a dozen good fleet accounts.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a great way for startup shops, and it's difficult for a startup shop to go out and get a fleet, but it certainly gives you some revenue that you can start to count on. Of course, you got to do the work, and you got to do it well, and you got to keep them happy. But it's it is a great way to get started. And are you guys in tire business too? I'm assuming you are.
We do some tires. We don't necessarily push for them. We just kind of do it as a customer convenience.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's interesting to kind of see how and everybody operates, and who does what and where, and what they're the best at. And it's always better to kind of stay in your lane, which is general automotive repair. and stick there. But we do like to take our cars to one place, and hey, those tires kind of looking rough, and get that done. What's the where I know there's a lot of work that is not as there's some work that's not as profitable as other. What is kind of the sweet spot or the type of work that you'd like to have more of?
Well, seeing as where we're located, we're kind of at the bottom of two major highways that are coming out of the mountains. So we see a lot of brake repairs, just people coming off the mountain that have warped their rotors. We do a fair amount of tires just considering our climate. And again, the location that we're at, people tend to burn through their tires more often than not. A lot of overheating problems. We're just kind of a severe climate state, and so we see a lot of those more major repairs.
Yeah, coming in, and location has a lot to do with that. What part of the country you're in, and what the weather and terrain and whatnot is. But I think that's makes sense to me that would be a big piece of your work. And there's a lot of people that do a lot of brake work, or a lot of some people do a lot of oil changes, a lot of diagnostics. And I know that's a challenge these days. And speaking of which, the diagnostic business is good, but the equipment is expensive, right?
Oh yeah, there's not much in our industry that's not expensive equipment.
Yeah. And so how do you decide, kind of, now that you've taken over the business, have you had to make any major acquisitions of equipment, or have you been able to avoid that at this point?
So I did add an additional lift to an empty bay that we had. We were pretty much already up to date with all of the latest scanners and equipment. I mean, once they're more than a couple years old, they're really kind of ancient in our industry. So we keep everything
You have
up
to
to date.
rotate them in and out pretty much, and get the latest and greatest.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I understand that completely. And do you guys have plans? I know I started to ask you, and I may have earlier, and then I probably interrupted you, but you've got your two shops today. Are you looking to expand that anytime in the near future, or are you content?
Not necessarily. I always entertain the idea of adding on another one, but I'm pretty content with two. It seems to be a pretty good level of sanity for me with two.
Well, that's double what many people have. So
Yeah.
the fact that you can handle them both and stay sane is good. And speaking of sanity, as a business owner, how do you manage your work-life balance, or do you have such a thing as that?
I do, and that's actually really important to me. I always preach to my team. I'm like, family first, work will still be here. If you have a family emergency or something, and I make sure to prioritize spending time with my family and raising my daughter. And so I work extra hard when I'm here so that I can have that time outside of work.
Yeah, that is good, because a lot of people, don't have a balance in their life, and it leaves a void, and it's just something that it's always nice to hear of people who have been able to structure their days such that they can get more done in the allotted time, and still get home and have a home life, with their families. And how's your daughter?
She's 10.
10 years old. Yeah. What an age. So she's busy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I can imagine, mine's 22 in a couple of weeks. So, I remember those days though. And I would love to go back to them. So cherish it and enjoy that as much as you can while you're growing your business, and finding all your success. And And I'm sure you're going to be or you are an inspiration to her. And as she gets older, that'll become even more prevalent. Do you think she'll come up and decide to take over from you one day?
She already loses sleep over that. She asked me about a week ago. She's like, "Well, Mom, when you retire, like it's going to be next week that I retire." She goes, "Will I have to run the family business, or can I go run my horse farm?"
How cute! How cute!
So,
I'm sure you told her whatever you want to do, honey.
yeah, I told her I do this so that you can follow your dreams.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So inspiring. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about or share that maybe I haven't asked you about so far?
I guess not anything specifically, really.
Well,
I just, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say I want to be respectful of your time and not take too much. So, I thought maybe if you had any parting words of wisdom or pearls of wisdom, as my mother would have said, we'd love to hear it, or if there's anything there that I neglected to get to that I meant to get to, we'd love to hear from you. So, any parting words of wisdom?
I guess my biggest offering is, find your purpose, find the reason that you want to pour your heart and your soul and your sweat and your tears and your blood into this industry every day, and make it a purpose to do something that's bigger and better than yourself.
Well put, very well put, and I think that is inspirational for all of us, and doing more than being bigger than ourselves is really something that I think translates well to our younger entrepreneurs who have a much greater appreciation, I think, for world issues and challenges, and wanting to be a part of something bigger. And I applaud you for doing that, and also applaud you for taking the initiative to own your own business now and to run it and to be successful, and to be out there working every day to provide a great value and great service to your community, which again, just outside of Denver and Lakewood, there's 2 locations, complete auto repair. So for all our listeners in your area, again, if you haven't been there recently, it's probably time. Something needs to be tweaked on that vehicle, certainly. So get in and see Shaundra and her team. And Shaundra, I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to share your story and your thoughts and inspiring ideas with our audience. So thank you very much for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity, Jeff. I really appreciate it.
Well, we really appreciate you, and for all our listeners, we appreciate you as well for being here to kind of hear the story, and please feel free to share it, amongst your friends. A great inspirational story with Shaundra Hosier here today with us, and a female entrepreneur and a male, traditionally male business, but that is not the case any longer. There's lots of women getting into the repair or automotive services business, and if that's something that's a dream of yours, and don't let anything stop you. Go get in and do what it is that you want to do. So that's my final thought. Thank you for listening to us today, to all our listeners, and we hope you'll join us again for another episode of the Local Leaders Podcast. And thanks again, Shaundra.